What is up, guys? Welcome back to Fit Body Secrets, where my mission is to bring you guys inspiration, motivation, and a ton of tips to help you guys on your fitness journey. And today I want to talk about willpower. Okay, a lot of people talk about how they wish they had more willpower around food, and they wish they had the willpower to stay consistent with their nutrition. They wish they had the willpower to keep following through with the things that they promised to themselves. And today, what I really want you guys to understand is the real reason why you're having a hard time with willpower. And this kind of goes hand in hand with discipline as well. I think a lot of people are like, I wish I could be so disciplined. How many of you guys can relate to like knowing somebody that just like seems like they got their shit together? It's like they just always are like on the ball. They go to a restaurant, they don't care what other people are ordering. They just stick to their guns. They order what they're going to order. And you wish you could be that person. Or you see them, they're in the gym 5 or 6 days a week. And you look at your life and you're like, man, it must be so easy for them. Like, how do they do it? And you're like, well, they don't have 3 kids and XYZ. Or you see the person that does have the 3 kids and you're like, how do they do it? They seem to have the willpower and the drive to just keep doing it no matter what life brings them. Why don't I have that? And you continue to judge yourself and you're like, oh, if I only had more willpower, I'm so weak. I just wish I could be committed. And guess what that also does? Continues to reinforce the belief that you suck, that like you're the problem, and that like you're just not going to be able to get anywhere in your journey. And today, I'm going to keep the episode somewhat short because it's not a whole bunch, because it's really simple, basic things that you guys need to understand about willpower and why it is so hard for you guys to practice willpower. And hopefully, this episode will help you maybe not be so hard on yourself and find other ways to work on your body composition that don't require you to practice so much damn willpower. Okay. So, first and foremost, what you need to understand about willpower is that willpower is finite. We don't have an infinite amount of willpower. We only have so much willpower. And when it comes down to how we use that willpower, we have to think about all the ways in which we are practicing willpower, not just in what you're eating, but in life in general. Okay. Like, there's a lot of things you do in life. Again, I think discipline and willpower go hand in hand, that you don't want to do, but you do. Okay. When it comes to willpower around food, you're also likely confronted with a lot of decisions around food when you're in a very stressed out state. Okay. So which really, really pushes your willpower buttons. It's like, what would I call them? It's like you're somebody that's like always on the go, always chaotic. And thinking about all the times that you have to practice willpower. A lot of people like to label themselves stress eaters or emotional eaters. A lot of people tell themselves that they don't really have a plan, they're always winging it. Okay. A lot of these things are forcing you to have to practice willpower in times of your life where you're not in a clear headed mind. Like you're thinking about so many other things. So it makes it very hard. So I want you to think about, when it comes to nutrition, how many places in your life you are actually having to practice willpower in order to stay successful with your nutrition, right? Places number one, it's work. You're stressed out and somebody caters a meal. You have your meal prep, but man, those French fries, they smell really good. Okay. Sometimes you can say no. Other times it's like, nope, I don't want that. I want those. Maybe it's not even the catered food. Maybe it's they have in the break room a big jar of candy, or you see these chips and snacks and all these things. Maybe somebody brings things to the table and you're like having to practice willpower while you see everybody else eating those things. They're sitting right in front of you. You know, you pick up foods for the kids and you know that you don't want to be eating those things, but they're in the house and now you're seeing them on the counter. They're in your sight and you're having to practice willpower there. Okay. When you're picking up kids' foods from the drive through, or maybe when like your husband or your wife is like, hey, I really want to have this for dinner. And you know that that's really something that you shouldn't be eating because you're trying to follow your diet. And your husband's like, I don't want to eat your diet food tonight. I want to have this. And now you're having to practice willpower while you watch your family eat one of your favorite dishes and you're eating your boring chicken and broccoli, right? So thinking about all of these places that you're practicing willpower, not to mention the times where now you're also trying to be social and you go into the social settings with the right plan, right? I'm going to stick to my nutrition. I'm going to stick to my nutrition. And then you get there and you're like, oh, I can have a little bit. Now you're having to practice willpower while you see everybody else around you having a good old time. And you're like sitting there with your bland, boring salad, trying to stay committed to yourself, right? So thinking about all the areas that you're practicing willpower in your life around other situations that are affecting your food decisions, stress at work, environment with with friends, family influences, all of this stuff, right? You're having to practice willpower in so many areas. So what you have to understand is it's not that you don't have willpower. You have willpower. You are exhausting your willpower because you are being confronted with so many situations where you have to make decisions on the fly. And that gets extremely exhausting, extremely exhausting. And your solution to that is always, I'm just going to say no. I'm just going to say no. That is the equivalent of somebody saying, just do this. When in reality, like that might not be realistic, right? You can't just flip a switch like that. Okay. There has to be some things put in place that we're going to talk about. Okay. The next problem with willpower, we know it's finite, we're practicing it entirely too much, is that when people are looking to a solution to lack of willpower, okay, they typically are thinking about they need to be harder on themselves. I got to be harder on myself. I got to clean up my diet. I'm going to get so dialed in this time. I'm going to stick to it. I'm ready. I'm meal prepped. I'm strict. I'm ready to go. And they end up like going on this super extreme diet or committing to something that's not realistic. And now they're already in a willpower debt, I'm going to call it. And now they're literally feeding the fire. So now they're practicing willpower in all of these situations and now making it even harder for themselves because now they have to stick to a very rigid diet, which is going to require more willpower. They are literally adding to the fire. Okay. And this typically will happen. What typically happens before this is they will go from practicing so much willpower to exhausting that willpower and then recharging it, right? So think of it this way. You're like, I just can't do this. And you quit. You give in, and this is where you're at. You're like, I'm so blah, 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 blah. Whatever you want to label yourself because you couldn't stick to your saying no, right? So you then decide it just isn't worth it. You give up, you do your thing. You're no longer practicing willpower at all. The willpower, it gets recharged a little bit. And you also simultaneously are starting to eat more freely. Maybe you're starting to see that weight's coming on, or you're not happy with how you look. The willpower is coming back. The motivation is there again. But rather than taking a more sustainable approach, you think about you just need more willpower. And that's where part 2 comes in, like I mentioned. You look for a restrictive diet. And that's going to be the thing. I'm just going to be disciplined this time. I'm going to have more willpower. And you keep telling yourself it's just going to happen. So you commit to that diet when your batteries are recharged, your willpower is charged up. And for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, you have enough. And then again, it fizzles out because of all the other things. And this cycle of practicing willpower and then having no willpower and then trying to use too much of it just continues on over and over and over again. And you're in this cycle where you just can't seem to break free. And you keep telling yourself, it's all you. It's all my fault. Now, there are some things that are lacking that are why you're struggling so much to have willpower. And I'm going to go over those things. What you guys have to understand is willpower is finite and you're likely exhausting it entirely too quickly in entirely too many different areas when you are trying to practice it while in a fat loss phase. Okay, so we have to understand that stuff first. So today is permission to forgive yourself for not having willpower because you literally have exhausted it. You've used it all up, it's gone. And what happens is, whenever you get a little bit back, you end up using it entirely too quickly on the wrong things. Okay. So if you are somebody who wants to be able to have more willpower, you have to stop exhausting your willpower. And that comes down to a couple of very important strategies that are going to help you today. Okay. Number one is you have to have a nutrition strategy and a plan and somewhat of a timeline. You can't really you can't really estimate per se, like you can't like accurately say I'm going to lose X pounds by this date, but you can have a rough idea of how long you can actually commit to being in a fat loss phase for, and really prioritize being in that fat loss phase for that period of time, knowing that like there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel, so it gives you a little bit more focus. I'm focused on this thing right now. And it's kind of like the kid that's going to go to the doctor and get a shot. And you're like, if you go get a shot, I'll take you to the playground afterwards. Like, he's like, all right, I'll take the shot because I really want to go play. Right. It's things like that you have to think about. It's not so much that you don't want to be in so much pain though, that you can't sustain it. It needs to be sustainable. Right. So you've got to set yourself up for success by having a clear cut plan. Okay. Number two is you have to understand how that plan is actually working. This way, you're not getting hung up by using results to dictate your actions, which will also likely lead to you not wanting to practice as much willpower because the motivation won't be there. If you're getting on the scale every single day, expecting it to go down and it's not going down, and now you're having to say no more often, you're going to start to get frustrated because you're going to be like, well, scale's not moving. Those cookies are looking really good right now. I know I shouldn't have one, but this isn't working anyway, so I'm going to have it. Okay. So you end up allowing yourself to justify not using your willpower. And then afterwards, you're like, why did I just do that? Right. So you have to understand the plan. You have to understand realistic results. And you really have to understand what it looks like to have not just a plan for the timeline and what you're signing up for and all that stuff, but also a plan for each day. And when I say this, it's not about you going into MyFitnessPal and tracking every little thing and planning your whole day ahead of time. That might work for you and it does work for a lot of people. But what I'm really talking about is having a plan in place so that you have things on hand to eat and that you enjoy those things and you have a plan when you're going out that feels right to you. It's not just saying no. It's saying, okay, these are the things that I want to have. These are the things that I know that I don't need to have. And I'm going to find the blend of those things and allowing yourself to kind of have a plan ahead. Because, like I mentioned, if you're trying to practice willpower when you're already in a stressed out state, it becomes so much harder. So, you need to understand that you can't practice willpower when you're also acting impulsively. It's very difficult. So, the more you can be planned ahead, the better. So having snacks on hand. If you're going to have the cookie, planning in the cookie, which comes down to number three, is like, you got to be able to, I didn't really number these, but you know what I'm saying? You got to be able to be flexible with things. The more you tell yourself no all the time, like it's going to make it that much harder. Now, I'm not telling you guys that you say yes all the time either, because you do have to practice some discipline, but you have to also be a little bit flexible. And then the last piece of this is that even though willpower is finite, and I'm mentioning about the exhaustion factor of willpower is practiced. It is something that is practiced. And so sometimes people on the flip side of things haven't really actually practiced what it feels like to use willpower. Most people are not that way. But if you're somebody that has always allowed yourself to kind of like have whatever you want, do whatever you want, and maybe not just with nutrition, but in all areas of your life, kind of like a free bird, and you've never actually really practiced having willpower or having to say no or not getting your way, it might be very advantageous for you to actually sit with saying no. And that's a practice skill. The more you learn to say no to things, the easier it becomes. it's one of those things that like it's not going to feel easy before you do it. It feels easier after you do it. And think of it this way, and I like to I like using addictions here as a good thing to talk about. You know, addiction's not a good thing, but people that recover from any kind of addiction are mentally very strong-willed because the amount of willpower it takes to go from somebody that is so reliant on a drug or alcohol or whatever their addiction is to being able to control those thoughts enough to stop that habit has developed a tremendous amount of willpower. So, practicing willpower is learning how to say no. It's learning how to say, you know what, I normally say yes and don't even think about having that cookie at lunch. But today I'm going to say no. I don't know why I keep bringing up a cookie, but like I'm going to say no today and see what that feels like. And in the moment, it's going to feel hard, but like in 30 minutes, you're not even going to be thinking about it anymore. So, other things to recognize is finding the balance of how to say no when you need to say no. So, hopefully, this episode was helpful for you guys today. Like I said, I'm going to keep it a little shorter today. I just wanted to talk a little bit about willpower. But if you guys have any questions or need help, or you feel like you're a willpower failure, or maybe you're in a willpower debt, please feel free to reach out to me. You don't have to follow a restrictive diet. You don't have to completely, give up everything. And you don't have to continue to beat yourself up just to achieve the goals that you have for yourself. There is a much more sustainable way. And obviously, anything that you're going to do is going to require effort, but making sure that you're putting your effort in on the right things is what matters most. So that's all I got for you guys today. Have a good afternoon.